Hi everyone, I'm Warlord Magni. Thanks for coming to my Newb to Warlord series. Today we are doing the class on positioning. This is a pretty important class in terms of advancing from the beginner basics level up to advanced. So you should pay attention. Okay. So positioning, a lot of people think about positioning as just a physical component, but it's not just physical, right? Like people are thinking of like, oh, this is where I am and that's where my opponent is. But it's also a very mentally conceptual topic. So the physical attributes that are pretty straightforward, it's the literal position. What is the range between me and my opponent, in this case, Sean? What is our guard, right? So is our guard high? Is it low? Do I have like a flat guard? What is my guard in respect to my opponent's guard, as well as its placement? What shots am I throwing, as well as what blocks I'm blocking, or like how I'm blocking the shots? You're supposed to throw something, right? How am I blocking the shot? How can I return? A lot of this also comes down into angle. So, for example, if I'm trying to throw for this arm, if I throw this chop this way, the geometry, like the angle of attack, is away from Sean's body. But if I throw like this wrap, the sword is now angled towards Sean's body, and it gives me a higher probability of hitting Sean's arm, right? Those are sort of the simple physical attributes that we talk about, but more the mental attributes of positioning are things about like understanding the geometry, how I was talking about, of like the sword is pointing away from Sean's body, or the sword is pointed towards Sean's body. Understanding your shots, your setups, your blocks and responses. So in this case of like, okay, if I throw a shot here, you're supposed to block it. If I throw this shot, how is Sean blocking it? What am I exposing? Right? So in this case, it would be my torso on my right side. So that's like a high probability slot of where I'm going to be attacked. Right? So then how do I block that? And then how do I capitalize to counter? Or, not just like the high cross, so come back to the block, of like coming back down, trying to see where my opponent is now open. This is kind of like you're playing chess and trying to get your opponent to move their guard and understanding where that guard goes. A lot of positioning, in my opinion, is about building models to predict where your opponent is going to go. Like, what is the probability of, like, if I throw this cross, what is the probability that Sean is going to go for this shoulder versus this shoulder, or versus this hip, or versus this hip, right? Most typically, it's going to be here because this is a kill shot, or the alternative is, from my experience, is going to be the crossover trying to get the arm, right? So then those are typically where you're going to want to plan the blocks. Additionally, like, you can think about when we're engaging, sword and board is a great example for this. So if we're in sword and board and Sean and I are posted up, there's almost no point in me going for this back hip because it's one, blocked by a shield. One is blocked by a shield, and two, it's farther away from me. Whereas this hip, this sword side hip, is now exposed to me. So that is a much easier target to hit than the back hip, right? Anybody that is fighting sword and board should be more conscientious about whatever hip is being pushed forward, because that's the easier target, as well as that shoulder, right? So if you have this very like angled frame, you're pushing out and kind of exposing part of your body to be hit. So that's going to be like a higher probability of where they're going to attack. Some questions that I always like to answer or like to pose when talking about positioning is, all right, so if I throw here, What am I exposing? Where is my opponent going to throw? How am I going to block? And then what can I respond from in that case, right? So I'm like building a series of sequences in the physical position of the fight, right? So I throw here, Sean throws something, right? That's an easy block, and then I come down, right? For example, when receiving a shot, right? So if I'm not initiating, how am I going to block that shot? And then what is going to be countered, right? So Sean just throws something, right? And then I can counter there. Again, a lot of positioning and like blocking these shots as well as like optimizing your path movements. So instead of like slant this way a little bit. So if Sean throws this shot on this side, right, I don't need to go like this to block it, because that's exposing a lot of my other body. I'm going out of position. Like I'm throwing my sword down, my arm is out, easy to see, right? Easy to counter. Or if I need to like come back and come like off my feet and move my weight back so I can disengage, it's harder to do that when I'm down here because my weight is mostly over my foot. All of my weight is on this leg. Okay? Additionally with that, like just kind of going on a small tangent, is if instead like I do this and Sean now disengages, it's I don't have any weight off this back foot to push. It's much harder to come forward. I would actually have to lead with my front foot to continue to engage. Additionally, so if we're like in the starting guard, come back this way, right? If we're in the starting guard, other things to think about is like, if I shift my guard down, how does my opponent respond? If they do that, what access does it give me? So in this case, like if I'm pushing my guard down and to my left, and if Sean follows, that's exposing his offside shoulder, right? So then I can follow up and hit that, for example. Other things as well is going away from just the stagnant fight of if I step this way, how does Sean respond? And what do I gain access to, right? If Sean stays stagnant, I have access to like all this inside. But if instead I step and Sean counter and adjusts, nothing changed. Maybe I can get on the inside of the forearm, for example, or outside. So really, if I do X, what is Y? And how do I take advantage of Y? So now I'm going to go into some key aspects of positioning and just touch on them really quickly. So first off, in positioning, range control. Range control is what controls the fight, right? Like, where are we relative to each other? Am I able to engage? Am I able to fight at all, right? So in C range, right, this is like really far away. There's almost nothing that we can do to each other, but now we can plan our engagement. No, maybe I want to like come in and then I want to take like a deep lunge, get into this A range, and we figure something out. Or maybe alternatively, we're going to circle. And here we are, we're circling. What happens if I stop? Right, so if we're circling and I stop, does Sean keep going? What happens? Like, I'm then exposing more of this shoulder to Sean. Or if instead of stopping, well, really quick, I stop, I expose more of this shoulder, but what do I gain an advantage of that? Additionally, if we're rotating and I counter rotate, what happens? How does Sean respond to that? Counter turn, stopping, or, we're also circling. And then what happens if I step in? How does Sean respond? Does Sean plant and prepare? Does Sean back out? These are all questions that understanding how your opponent is playing and is responding to, these engagements will tell you on how to like strategize the attack. It's a lot of mental game in understanding where we are and what I have access to relative to my opponent, as well as what I'm exposing, right? Talking about guard placement. So let's just do single sword for this case. So if I have this flat guard, or this mid guard, right? What do I have access to from Sean? And what else is, what does he have access to me? One reason why I like this guard is because it shuts down the direct lanes. I break up the field of combat into this top and lower section of my sword, right? So Sean is going to have a really hard time like coming over up top or over to the side because I can just block out. But additionally, this shot gives me a lot of clean, direct access to the straight chop shot or coming over and like getting a shoulder slot. Let's see. Okay. Shot availability, defensive openings. Oh, I'm going to pick up, continuing with the guard movement or topic. You know, how does the guard respond to different openers? So like, this is a pretty standard guard within Sword and Board. But if I throw like this opener, what am I exposing? You typically want safe openers to be able to initiate a combat. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to open something so you can counter. Or not counter, but take advantage of. Right? But also while you're throwing these, you have to be careful to not overexpose a body part. You know, so a bad opener would be a high cross. Because, well, yeah, you're supposed to have a better shield. But, you know, I could be dark-sided or whatever. Yeah, or a straight chop, or, you know, coming under and doing like an upward chop like that. Additionally, now, like, with Sword and Board and thinking about these other things, this also applies to all other categories, but including fakes and pumps, how am I able to, like, draw that equipment down? Really what you're trying to do in this case is, like, understand how I put an input in and how a response comes out, and what response. And what is the probability of that response? Kind of in the concept of my adaptation video. If you haven't seen that, check that out. Right, so for example, if I like do a pump fake here, how does Sean respond? Sean instinctively like moved his gear, and then I could follow up. That was a little hard, I'm sorry. Right, but I could like pump high and throw because it's opening, it's causing a response to move that shield over because he respects my attacks. Additionally, you can think about like body feints as well, right? So a fake is when you're moving your equipment. A feint is when you're moving your body, right? So if instead of doing this, I can move over and still get the same shot, the same kill location. Lastly, you can also think about in positioning, you know, and like talking about probabilities of hit locations of baiting, right? So if I'm shield foot forward, I have, you know, just the tip of my shoulder peeking out, I'm baiting that shoulder slot, and depending on how good the fighter is, they may or may not take it. If they take it, right, I'm planning for it, so take it. You know, I'm waiting for that engagement to just boom, chop in or whatever. Okay. Then going into like openers and setups and combos, I already talked about openers a little bit. You know, you want to do safe initiation for this. So you're coming in, if in Sword and Board, like one of the common shots that I'll do is I'll throw something like this. So in this location or this shot style or specific attack, my arm is protected by my shield. Only like maybe I'll even expose my hand a little bit, but I'm pretty protected, and both of my shoulders are, there's a decent amount of space between my shoulders and my board, right? And my hips are far away. So this is a pretty safe shot. So I'm pretty much ready for any follow-up. So just follow up with something. And then if, I get a high cross, and then an easy come up again, or I can throw, and then do something like that, move offline, something where I'm doing a safe shot to initiate, waiting for a response, and then I capitalize on where like the high probability shot's gonna be. Other safe shots is something like this in sorted board. I'm throwing a straight chop across. I'm almost blocking off the lane for Sean to throw like a straight chop to the board side. He's gonna either have to go underneath or over the top, right? So then if it's over the top, dark side combo, or if it's underneath, right, I can like block or come over, block that shot, and then follow up. It's a chess game, really. This is where positioning, I think about positioning as a chess game in itself, of where am I relative to my opponent and how do I capitalize. Right, in building combos and setups, knowing where the probabilities are, what I have open and accessible to my opponent or what I want to hit, and knowing the chances of them following up, I can build combos to capitalize on that of like, okay, I want to get this money shot or this hit on Sean. It's going to be a hard percentage chance of just, starting out from guard. So, okay, I'm going to like pump over here to get the guard over, and then I'm going to come in, right? But when I do this pump, depending on how far Sean comes in, if Sean overcorrects a lot, right, and now I have the inside, well, outside, sorry, this is outside on Sean, that's really easy. But if instead I do this and Sean has the inside, I'm now super susceptible to getting armed, right? So that would be bad in that case. So I'm going to have to like come up with a counter of something like this, or come back in and then follow up as like a backup plan. Where to follow up? Understanding how to block the lanes and the angles, right? So in this case, if I'm here, this is Sean's going to have the inside lane. What sort of blocks are accessible to me to block the shot? So if I come in and I do something like this, it works, but it's not a strong block because Sean can like, if Sean hits out there, I'm going to drop the sword almost instantly. But instead, I can come back out and back out for that. Or if instead I'm here, I can step out to disengage. I can step in. You weren't supposed to move the sword. Right? I can step over to get the inside now. I'm, pivoting the plan. Stuff like that. And then also just realizing like the chances of success on a given combo. So, like, I have this combo that I like to throw in a single sword. I call it Turkish Delight. It's great. So I throw like across, and I follow up with a chop, like a straight chop, and then I'll flat chop across, right? Typically, this shot isn't going to land. That's not the shot that I want to land. But that shot typically will, and then this will as well. I'm really just beating the shit out of you right now. Right? It's which shot is going to have the highest percentage of actually landing, and then which shots are going to kill, and which shots are going to wound. Also, something to think about is like, what are the chances of failure in tagging something else? So, going sorted board, the most common situation is like, you go for a hip shot, or switch legs so people can see. Say I want to get this money, but, oh, I'm bad, and I hit a leg. instead, right? Now I have this game, and I have to deal with this. Check out my fighting leg opponent's video, right? But this is now a different fight than Sean standing up. You can stand up now. A couple of the last things I want to talk about is chambering shots, right? In Amtgard, specifically, it's really easy to chamber a shot because a lot of our equipment, or our equipment, is much lighter than, say, Dagger, Bell, or Darkon. And so you chamber shots not just off of an attack, right? So where can I attack from here? You know, this shot is almost chambered. That's a chambered shot. But also coming on the defensive side of, all right, where do I block? And what shots can I follow up with? So if you throw this side, right? Okay, I can block here, throw on top, but instead, switch me sides. But if instead, so throw a shot, right? I could block like this, but instead I pivot. And now I have even better access to the inside. I like to chamber a lot of my shots by doing level changes, and that provides a lot of power. So switch. So I'll like throw a chop, and then come down, right? And then while I'm exploding up, I can also take other shots using the momentum of my body to provide power. Okay? How's your arm feeling? Good. So doing it off of blocks, doing it off of your starting shots, right? Chambering those shots, and your responses. And then lastly, I want to talk about shot optimization. This is, I think, really important in terms of your positioning, right? So pick up your board. I'm not gonna, you go on this side. So if I want to get like that hip, I can like come really low. I can do like a very suboptimal shot where I'm like coming here and then coming up, something like that. That may not be super great. Something that may be a little bit more faster and quicker is coming in, right? This shot is much faster than this shot. This also makes sense in wraps. So you're gonna need to like tilt a little bit. Go board foot forward. It's gonna be easier. It's gonna be harder anyway because you have a dome shield. Use a better piece of equipment. Right, so I can do like a full wrap to do this, but if in any circumstance you have the ability to just do a flat wrap, do a flat wrap. Go single. Right, this is also common. I had this problem. Hey, can you guys go that way? Thanks. I used to have this problem on my climb, is that I would throw nothing but wraps. And so that would make my timing super slow because I'd have to go, all the way out. You're seeing a lot of this motion that is giving my opponent time to respond on. But if instead I can optimize, trying to get that inside arm of this chop, if instead I can straight chop, just do that, almost done, right? So, chop shots are going to be the fastest shots that you can ever get. The point of wraps is to get around guards. So thinking about that and using that like more intelligently is pretty important in terms of like positioning and optimizing your shot combos. But that's all I have prepared for today. Thanks for your time and attention, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Newb to Warlord series. Also, thanks Sean for like letting me beat you.